Hi, everybody. Here we are back with our coaches and another episode of Connecting with the Coaches. And this week we're going to talk about Orphan Sunday, which happens in a lot of churches. And it's used to bring attention and awareness to the plight of kids who have no home. And many times, I should have looked up the verse, but I think it's James 1:27 that says that we are to be helping the widows and also the orphans. I can't remember the exact scripture, but um, so a lot of churches do this. And it's a wonderful thing because we do need to be aware of this plight. But as it's coming up here, I think it's in November this year, we were talking about it and just some of the things that churches do really well and some of the things that we wish they would do a little bit differently, and maybe some of the ways that our clients have even expressed hurt or frustration in Orphan Sunday. So let's talk about it. What do you guys know about Orphan Sunday? What have you experienced? What have your clients said about it?
I think that from just the memory that I have of it, just in our church, I have good memories of it pre-adoption. I thought it was a great way to sort of showcase adoption and promote it. Post-adoption, it was just a little bit different take for me.
Yeah.
So,
So what was different?
well, I think when you're going through an adoption like we have, that you sort of feel like, I just have to hang in there because people are now watching. And I feel like it promotes the good parts about adoption, but it doesn't support and talk about the hard parts when an adoption doesn't go the way it should. And I feel like there should be more in place within the church to support those families that don't have the outcome that they hoped for.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Amy?
Oh, just those big brown eyes that need a home and just how much we have and how um I mean for us we were military, so we even had we had insurance, we had such an exciting life. They just could be exposed to so many great things.
Mhm.
It was just going to be so wonderful. And we didn't always I was always sad when we would go to a church that didn't have an orphan Sunday. Um, and so always wanted to be a part of that. And I think on this side of things, I I feel like there needs to be more support for those that have adopted, even if they're not like it's not extreme situations like we had. But I just think those attachment issues, they last forever. That's you lose your mother and just replace that. It's just that's not a thing. And so I feel like, we need to be more cognizant of that pain and how that's not going away, and supporting families who are and children who are in that space of carrying a wound that doesn't ever go away.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen healing and we've seen, I remember hearing recently somebody talking about kind of a traumatic situation and they're like, well, kids are resilient. And one of my clients just recently wrote me a note and said, the biggest lie I believed up until now is that kids are resilient. That's something that's just taught all over the place. We believe kids are resilient. Are they resilient from falling down and scraping their knees? Yes, absolutely. Kids jump back up and they cry for a little bit and then they get a scab and there you go, we're done. But we're not talking about a little scab here. We're talking about an entire change to their world that is so complex that their little minds and hearts can't even comprehend what has just happened. The one person, mom in particular, and dad, but mom is the one, they grew inside mom for 9 months. They know her smell, her walk, her feel, her sound, her voice, everything. And all of a sudden, even if it's right at birth, they're handed off to somebody else, or they're placed in an orphanage, or they're raised in an abusive or neglectful home, or a drug addicted home, or a home with men coming in and out, or all different kinds of chaotic homes, a home without enough food. And so now, either voluntarily or involuntarily, they're being removed from that home and placed. So either they've been institutionalized in an orphanage, which, as much as these workers want to make it like a family, it is not a family. It is a couple of people over multitudes of children doing the best they can to just keep these kids alive and changed, and that's all they get. It's just feed them, change them, put them to bed. That's it. And if a child has been in a foster care, it may have been a good foster care, it may not have been, and it may not have been one, and there's moving and moving and moving, and we never know, is this going to be it? Is that going to be it? And so that attachment is really damaged right from the start, or within the first couple of years of life. And we know now that does last. And so even when there's healing, it's a long process of healing. It's not something that we get them home. I remember them telling us, when we were in another country, just get him home and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, we got him home and it was not fine. And so we kept thinking, well, maybe after 6 months, or maybe after a year, or maybe after 4 years, or maybe after 6 years. And it was not fine. And none of the therapists knew. And so when we're talking about churches and they're promoting adoption, what do we need them to understand?
Ugh. Well, I think, why are we promoting adoption if we don't have an adoption ministry set up for when they come home? Like, I feel like it's really, really, hey, sorry.
Dog.
I feel like it's really detrimental to throw money on the front end and help people get the kids home, and it's not trauma informed at all to think that that's all there is to it. There, you need to have teachers that are aware, trauma informed of what these kids, Sunday school teachers, what these kids are gonna bring to the table when they come to color. Like, there's just so much more that's necessary than the money on the front end. I mean, and we're all excited about that. I mean, we had to raise money. I don't know about you guys, but we've raised a lot of money.
Yeah, we didn't.
So we had great community helping us do that, and I'm thankful for that. But that was literally only the beginning.
Yeah.
In fact, it's barely the beginning, because that only gets you to the introduction part. It barely gets you home.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you've got a child who's totally traumatized. And now everybody else is starting to feel some anxiety over all the changes and all the chaos and the trauma that you didn't really realize was going to be what it actually is. And it starts triggering some things in you. And so now all of that support and funding is kind of gone. And you're supposed to be, ta-da, go.
I remember getting a meal from a mom in our church who, she had so many kids, and she lived a little bit out of town. And so here she comes with this sweet meal. She and two of her daughters came, and they didn't come in. They just handed us the meal and left. And I felt like, oh my soul, this woman has way more kids to feed than me. She lives out of town. She just spent I started adding up the time. Probably took her an hour to do this, an hour on the road. I should have just made the meal myself. I felt so blessed, but in the space that I was, I felt like, so that's just how, even you don't realize how the ways that you're going to be triggered yourself
Mhm.
And that's part of adoption. That's part of the support that we need. We need some place to be able to say, like, I'm embarrassed, or I wish I didn't need this. And there was no place for that. There was just, they were willing and there to help, but there was so much more that needed to be processed than anybody could possibly imagine.
Well, I remember at church in particular, our son, we could not take him into the nursery. He was
Mhm.
almost 4, but he couldn't handle, he didn't know
Mhm.
the language. He couldn't handle being left
Mhm.
with total strangers, you know. And so I remember just thinking we needed to be in church so desperately. So what do we do? Because we can't bring him into the big church. He wouldn't be able to sit still. He couldn't do that. But we couldn't take him to the nursery. And at that point, my mom was willing to, she offered this. She came up with this. I have an adopted brother, so I think she kind of had some experience, but she said, I'd be willing to go to church at the early service for myself, and then I'd stay for the second service and go to the nursery with him so that you could go to church. And I
Oh,
thought that's what every new adoptive family needs, is somebody who knows them well enough, who could be kind of on that inner circle, because otherwise you start messing with the attachment piece.
well, and that's what
Um,
happened to us. You know, it's
yeah,
like our adopted daughter went to the nursery because she loved everybody else. And that was her time to charm and manipulate and make us look like we were lying about what we had shared with a few people, right? That how hard it was. So that was always an anxious time for me because I didn't really want her going to the nursery
right,
because it was a time for her to just show the side of her that didn't exist in our home, you
right.
know? Yeah.
So we need to be able to offer different things for different families. You know, for one family, respite might be amazing, but for a newly adoptive family, they may just need somebody to come in and clean their house and to do some of the chores and some of the meals and some of those things like that, and even take some of the other kids out to go do other things, because that family is trying so hard to cocoon and bond with this new little one. So we need some emotional support, we need physical support, chore support, all of that kind of stuff. But what else would churches, what would we like to see?
I think just simple education, Carrie, that all adoptions don't look like the rainbows and unicorns that Orphan Sunday makes it look like it should. So if we educate that little ministry within the church that is the adoption ministry, that there could be families that come across this church that are struggling in their adoption. And this is what that looks like. I think that's where we get down to the where the rubber meets the road. It's like we can't just fluff it all up and then have an orphan ministry or an adoption ministry, and then that's it. We need to
Yeah,
educate these people what it might look like.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember during our roughest season, well, right before our roughest season, our church had come to us and asked us to do a video, and we did it on what a blessing adoption is. And we shared our struggles, but also talked about how, you know, God's going to get us through this. We're going to keep on keeping on. And then we hit a really, really rough season, and my PTSD kicked way up, and it started impacting our other kids, and it impacted our marriage, and we were falling apart. And I remember going up, we had a post-service prayer time at this church, and you could go up front for prayer. And I remember, I don't know why I kept this in my mind, but I knew I went up 24 weeks in a row for prayer. And, you know, they didn't know what to do other than pray. They did, and we needed the prayer, but there was nothing offered on top of that. And basically they were saying, like, well, take this to your small group. And then we took it to our small group. We literally blew up a small group because they couldn't handle dealing with this kind of stuff. And
Oh my gosh, yeah.
they had a meeting one time saying that we were only allowed to bring the same topic up 3 weeks in a row. And I'm like, well, this one ain't going to be solved in 3 weeks. But
Oh,
so that small
Oh,
group was
that's
like, we'll take it to the pastors. Well, we did, and they told us to take it to the small group. And so now we're in therapy, all these zillions of times a week. Our rent at one point, our mortgage cost less than we were paying in therapy bills for everybody. And no one at church knew what to do or how to help, and they couldn't help and they didn't help. And so we were just dying, and our family fell apart, and we ended up having to find a new home for our son. And then we were gossiped about in the church office. And so these are kind of warnings and things like, if you are part of a church ministry, if you're a pastor, if you're on staff, if you're part of an orphan ministry, an adoption ministry, just hear these stories. These are just between us. Now we have hundreds of clients that have more stories, similar, sometimes more horrific. But my husband and I were just talking about that video we did the other day. It's like they literally put us on a pedestal because we're sitting up on these high chairs and they're using us as the example. And I remember one time I had a retreat and this woman came, and they had been that family, and they had actually had this family travel around from church to church speaking on adoption. And they ended up having to place a few of their kids in other either facilities or families or whatever. And the shame of that, and like they were shunned from not only that church, but all the churches. And so when we are asking our families to adopt and to, we have a restaurant here in town that I see, and every time I go there, there's a sign up about how they need foster families. And, yes, we do need foster families, and yes, we do need adoptive families. We're not anti-adoption, we're not anti-foster, but we need the support that goes along with, from beginning all the way through, however God leads that, however it works out in each one of these families. Because, the family is important, the child is important, each human in that family is important, and we need to make sure that all of them are getting the support that they need.
Yeah. I wish that that somehow there was education, like you said, for staff. I mean, at least start with the staff and educate staff about what trauma informed really is, that boundaries are a part of supporting trauma. If you don't understand why you shouldn't be picking up and holding an adopted child in your Sunday school class, you're not trauma informed. If you don't understand why we don't give exorbitant gifts to adopted kids, you're not trauma informed. If you don't understand that the same topic is going to come up over and over again in a small group, you are not trauma informed. If I had a lady say to me in a Bible study one time, "Do you think you'll adopt again?" And this is like in the first year. So, oh my soul, we were still in shock and awe. And I said, "Oh no, I don't think so." And she said, "Oh good, I wouldn't want to know you then."
Oh, that's
This is
helpful.
this is a lady in my Bible study. Like, we over our trauma overwhelmed them, and they didn't know what to do. And that just, I know that's not, we know from talking to all these clients, that wasn't just me. I'm not the only one that was overwhelmed. My church became overwhelmed by the fact that I was overwhelmed. And that's happening to all these moms who have troubles,
Well,
right?
and it's right, Amy, what do most people do when they recognize that someone's overwhelmed? Most people want to turn the other direction, right? Because they don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
It's awkward, it's too much. So that's where you get, the people shunning and just sort of ghosting and everything else.
Yeah, it's a lot of it. I realize now, I didn't at the time. It was so hurtful to be ghosted. But I realize now that a lot of it was just they wanted to help and they didn't know how, and they couldn't, because here you really are in this tough spot with, like, okay, I need help, like I'm drowning, like seriously, and they can see you drowning. but you can't hold my child, you can't feed my child, because I've been taught all this stuff that says that I have to be the one who
Yes,
does all the things, or else they're never going to learn. So I
yes.
have to keep doing all the things. So you can't really help with the adopted child.
No,
You
you
have to
can't.
help mom with her anxiety.
Yeah.
You have to help the spouse. You have to help the marriage. You have to support the adopted or the biological kids, because that's where mom's anxiety is coming from.
No, and I
She's
think,
not able to cook a meal properly.
no,
She's not able to go to soccer games like she wants to. She's not able to be available to her husband the way that she always used to be. She's feeling like a complete and total failure in every area of her life.
great.
And no, you can't really help with the adopted kid. Just try not to mess up what we're working so hard to
Well,
do.
and
Don't hold
yeah,
them, don't feed
I
them,
agree.
don't give them gifts, and
And
do these
I
other
think,
things.
by, when you say, we need help, it's like, yeah, I would say for myself, my top priority at that time was just somebody willing to walk alongside me and believe what I'm saying.
I
Just
reached
believe
out
me.
to, yes,
Just believe me. I'm the same person that I was before the adoption. Don't think that all of a sudden my integrity is just gone and I'm
Right.
this child, right? And making these stories up. Just believe what I'm saying.
Well, and
I
also
reached out.
don't hyper spiritualize everything, because I remember once when I was not sleeping, we were in a small group and I was sharing with them. And, I'm ending up going to a psychiatrist and trying to get some help because I'm feeling like I'm going to die because I'm not sleeping. And I remember one person said, well, if you'd listen to God during the day, then he wouldn't have to keep you up at night. And I'm just like, okay, so now you're blaming me for it, or saying it's like sin, or that I'm not listening to God. I am crying out to God like 24/7. So how dare you say that it's because I'm not listening to God that he's going to punish me by keeping me up at night so that I'll listen to him, when all I needed was strength and sleep and rest so I could get through the day. And I just think
remember
people don't understand.
Well, I don't.
I reached out to a military missionary, and I said, I just need somebody to pray with me. Like, I was getting up early to bottle feed one of my daughters before she went to school to try to, we do all these strange things that we're just trying so hard. And so I thought it would help me if I just had somebody to start my day with me, to just pray with me. Because, my husband's military, he's been out the door for 2 hours already before I get up to bottle feed this child before the rest of the children get up. And so I thought, if I just had somebody pray with me like 15 minutes before I wake her up. So I asked her that. She's, because what do you want? What can we do? And so I said, would you pray with me? Would you call me in the morning and pray with me? And she said that that was too early for her and she could not do that. And then later she told me that I was just so angry that she just couldn't do that.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, when you don't understand that being overwhelmed and drowning and feeling like you're losing your family and your marriage and your biological kids, and that anger is not Christian or bad, you don't understand that that's part of the trauma.
It's part of the grief too.
Yeah. Well, I had a similar situation to the two that you just both described. And this was after the false allegations that our former adopted daughter accused me of. And I asked, a person that I considered a mentor at our former church to go for a walk. We were walking in this park. It was a beautiful fall day. And I'm telling her what happened. And I'm telling her that I didn't do anything and I'm innocent. And that's what these kids do, with false allegations. And she looked right at me and said, I think that you need to realize that this is God's warning sign to you. And I was like, but like, she wasn't getting that I was innocent. Like, and I think all these hurtful things, it's like, I didn't even know what to say back to that.
Exactly. You're just in like,
you're
dumbfounded.
Yeah, you're just like, what? So I think if you can't think of anything helpful to say, don't say anything.
Did your mother never teach you that?
Did you never watch Winnie the Pooh?
That's right. Well, you guys, I feel like this conversation could go on, and I think we're going to have it go on and on because there's so many more topics that we can piggyback on here. So we started out with Orphan Sunday and just helping churches to understand that if they're going to do something like this, if they're going to promote adoption and foster care, which we hope you do,
Mhm.
that you would become more trauma informed and start to understand what it means for these families as they bring, what it means to the child, what it means to the families as they bring in kids with trauma, and what that means for your staff, what it means for your church. You may need to have specific one-on-one with this child. You may need to have a different room. You may need to have some different resources and things like that. And the parent might be willing and able to help you. They may not even know. They may be so overwhelmed they have no idea. But that's what our ministry is here for. Also, if you would like some coaching, you can reach out to any of us at carryotoole.com. Just go to the contact us page, and you can reach out to any of us and we'll help you walk through what does it look like to have a trauma-informed ministry, trauma-informed church, and how to support the adoptive families, the foster families that you already have, as well as any that you might be encountering in the future. And as well as any who may be previous adoptive or foster families and too shamed to even talk about it. So the church is supposed to be a place for the broken to come. And we're asking you to be that place for this particular group of broken people. And yeah, so please reach out to us if you have any more questions, if you want more information, or you would like some coaching in this area. Any of us would be more than willing to do that with you. So thanks for joining us again on Connecting with the Coaches, and we'll see you back again next time. Ooh.